On this episode of the Sedara Whiteboard series, we're going to be talking about response and recovery plans and why they're important to have for your organization. Response and recovery plans are very important because they really dictate how an organization is going to respond to certain types of events when they happen. What are the three main types of response and recovery plans? First is business continuity. Business continuity plans refer to a business's ability and procedures to restore critical business components after an event is found. Disaster recovery, on the other hand, talks about how a business will respond to a disaster, and that could be a power outage, a system outage, or any other type of unplanned incident, and how they're going to recover the data and the IT infrastructure after a disaster happens. The last one is incident response. Incident response plans are about procedures and plans in place to help people detect, respond to, and then eradicate an incident from a network after it's already happened. So why is it important to have response and recovery plans? Well, first, having these plans in place ahead of an event will allow us the opportunity to make the right decisions when an event happens. Not having plans will usually cause people to not understand their roles and responsibilities, and they can cause an event to last longer once it's already taken place. One of the common things that I see with people in general and in organizations is that they have good operational skill when it comes to responding to an event, but they just don't have any plans in place and nobody knows what to do when an event happens. Normally, when I'm going through gap assessments, the three main things that I see is a lack of policies and procedures, a lack of documentation, but also it's a lack of response and recovery plans. Usually it's one of the three big ones that I talked about, which is business continuity, incident response, and disaster recovery. And a lot of people think that when it comes to responding to an incident, that it's really IT's responsibility to do these things. And that's not always the case. It's going to take multiple different places of the business to come together in order to respond to an event appropriately. And a lot of people will think that their part of the business is the more important part of the business. And that's why it's important to have these plans. It helps us prioritize what parts of the business we're going to bring up first. And over the years, as more cybersecurity incidents happen, more disasters happen, when it comes to cyber insurance, a lot of these organizations are looking for these response and recovery plans out by name in questionnaires. So if you don't have them, more than likely they're going to have some questions for you for why and might deny you coverage for your cyber insurance, which is why these are very crucially important. If an organization has these plans already in place, they're normally missing some key pieces of information. Some of those pieces of information can be contact information, resources, what resources are important, the prioritization of those resources, and how those all are going to be restored after an event happens. One of the most common things that I see is if an organization have plans, they're not updated to current specs for the company. Whatever the company is doing, it's usually a couple of years behind, usually 3 or 4. So it's important to not only review these annually, but also have what we call tabletops or drills for these plans to ensure that these plans are up to date and that they actually work for responding to an event. Ways that people can do tabletop exercises is in your industry, there's going to be disasters and incidences that are common, and it's good to drill and tabletop on those types of incidences. Other key pieces of information that is usually missing from these plans is, if an incident ever did happen at your organization, that lessons learned is going to be kind of part of that. So we're taking the lessons that we learned from that incident and updating our plans, and that can be part of the drilling and the tabletopping of those response and recovery plans. Lastly, a lot of people have questions about how do we create these plans in general. It's important that once we start in on the process, if we're starting from a ground floor, that we document what we currently do as a baseline, and then we start building plans around that. So part of the process is going to be identifying critical business components that are going to be needed to be brought up online first, and then also other resources such as applications, systems, and then IT infrastructure that we're going to want to bring up first, because a lot of people will think that their part of the business or their system needs to come first, but it's all about the impact to the business and making sure that those impacts are lessened, and having these plans in place is part of doing that. Another key component, especially when we talking about business continuity, is doing a business impact analysis. And what that is that's taking a specific component of the business and doing basically drills on saying, if this part of the business were to go down, how long would it take us to get back up, and what would the ramifications be if that part of the business wasn't able to come up in, say, a day, 6 hours, or any other length of time that the business deems as not appropriate for the longevity of their business. Also, parts of creating these plans, and I already spoke to this a little bit, is making sure that we take into account past disasters and incidences that we've had, because that'll give us a good idea about the responses that we took, and then also, incorporating lessons learned from those events so that we can further and make these plans about as rock solid as we can, because nobody likes to think that a disaster is going to happen, but we still need to plan for it, and we still need to have procedures in place to make sure that when an event happens that we respond appropriately. If you have questions on how response and recovery plans can improve your business, please go to sedarasecurity.com for more information. My name is Christopher Bruns. Thank you for watching the Whiteboard series.